I just want to reassert the urgency of now because it took a crisis, but we finally have elected people focused on housing policy once again. And I think that's really important. Let's recap. What are the policy initiatives folks are going to be talking about during the Advocacy Summit?
The FinCEN real estate rule. It's a very fluid situation right now. So by the time we get to May 11th, 12th, and 13th, things could have changed. But being able to tell that story to lawmakers, here's our experience on the ground and how it's impacting our ability to do our jobs, how it's impacting home buyers. So telling that story and then talking about fraud. It's not just with banks, it's not just with wire fraud, although that plays a huge part in real estate related fraud, but being like, here's what's happening in the real estate industry, here's what we're facing, here's the work we do to prevent fraud, and here's how we're there to protect consumers ongoing from fraud.
Welcome back to Keys to Real Estate. Well, if May is a power month for this industry, this conversation is where that really comes into focus because here's the reality. There are two very important conversations happening right now. One is about what the rules are going to be. And the other is about how we actually operate and function within them. And today we're continuing our conversation with Kevin Cameron, VP and Head of Government Affairs at ALTA, to talk about what it looks like to step into that first part, to actually engage in shaping what's coming, because those two worlds aren't separate anymore. The decisions being made in DC right now are going to show up in your operations, your closings, your workflows, your customer conversations faster than they used to, which is why ALTA's Advocacy Summit matters. It's not about being a policy expert. It's about showing up and telling the story of what you actually do, because that's the part the policymakers don't see unless you show them and tell them. So as you listen, think about where you sit in all of this, not just what's happening to the industry, but where you might want to participate more within it. So here's how I'd think about the opportunities that lie ahead in the next few weeks. Go to DC and shape what's coming. Have your say in the future of this industry. And then come to Kansas City, to NS3, to figure out what to do about it all, how it all works operationally, and with all the people making it work together in one room. That's really the opportunity sitting out in front of us this May to gain more control over our tomorrows and over our today. With that in mind, we're pleased to bring you Kevin Cameron, VP and Head of Government Affairs for the American Land Title Association. The presenting sponsor for this season of Keys to Real Estate is First American Trust. First American Trust redefines banking for title and escrow companies. They offer innovative solutions that integrate banking functions directly into title and escrow software systems, enhancing operational efficiency and safeguarding financial transactions. At First American Trust, you have direct access to a personal relationship manager who delivers answers in real time. First American Trust is also recognized as an elite provider for the American Land Title Association. As a wholly owned subsidiary of First American Financial Corporation, they have roots in real estate tracing back over 135 years and is the only bank owned by a title company. With deep roots, advanced solutions, and a commitment to real relationships, they are setting a new standard for the industry. The future of banking for title and escrow starts with First American Trust. Visit firstamtrust.com to learn more. Kevin Cameron, VP, Head of Government Affairs for ALTA. Welcome back. We've got to get to work talking more about what people can do. Well, you have an advocacy summit coming up. It is, if I may say, May 11 through 13. It's in Washington, D.C. I think people can get a little either unsure or intimidated by just what goes on at these things. I'm here as an evangelist. Let's fill the people in. What's going on and how do they participate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's a really exciting time. It is my favorite time of the year. ALTA Advocacy Summit, when we bring the title industry to DC. As I said last week, I talk to policymakers and their staff. I'm here to be an advocate for the industry, but there's only so much they want to hear from me. I like to think I'm a nice guy, but sometimes they need a little bit more than just me knocking on their doors. So we have over 200 folks registered. We can never have enough. I think coming into DC and being able to, as we've talked about, tell your story. I think there is no better way, and we can kind of go into demystifying advocacy, but I think it's coming to Congress, and this applies to, going to your state legislature or your town council or however your local government is set up. This is not just apply to Congress. It's a very simple formula that works all the way up and down the government spectrum. But coming to Congress and telling your story, talking about the work you do, how it impacts the people in your community. I think what's so great about the title industry is even the largest companies in the industry, we work on a small scale. We work with people in closing offices, title offices, law firms, however your community is set up. We are at the closing table walking these people through the biggest purchase, the biggest transaction they'll ever make in their lives. And, it sounds a little cheesy, but we are integral to the American dream. And I think coming and talking about the reality of the work that title professionals do day in and day out to promote the American dream of homeownership is such a great story to tell. And I hope more people would come to town and help me tell it.
And so, just to familiarize anybody that hasn't gone before, so you guys have a couple of days of sessions. You have
Yes.
some electeds coming through talking about their view on housing policy and how they're participating and all of that. And then, and this is critical because it can be a little intimidating before you've done it the first time.
Sure.
Like, I'm just going to show up and talk to my members of Congress. What am I supposed to say? I'd like to talk about how you prepare everybody in the summit to go have an effective Hill Day as they go meet their electeds and talk with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a great point. We do make sure we ease into things. I think, you start off and we have some fantastic panels every year talking about the market, the economy, the big issues that you and I talked about last week, whether it be fraud or attorney opinion letters and unregulated alternatives to title insurance, all of these big issues, kind of getting the lay of the land. And then talking about our team works behind the scenes as we're getting ready to kind of make a game plan for you. So it starts off on a Monday, full day Tuesday, and then Wednesday is when we go to Capitol Hill, making sure that by Wednesday, you understand the issues we're going to be talking about, and they're not anything new. We're talking about things that title professionals do every day. It may be worded in a little bit of a different or maybe on a more zoomed out macro scale, but this is stuff that everyone works on. Everyone in this industry is working day in and day out on fraud prevention. Everyone in this industry has, as we talked about last week, over the first couple of weeks of March, has dealt with FinCEN and understands the experience of what title professionals went through and how burdensome and tough that was. So being able to come to DC and come up with a game plan so that on Wednesday, set up meetings for everyone. Really, we like to make it as easy as possible because it's a big lift to come to Washington, D.C., leaving your office or your family for a couple of days. And it's intimidating. I can understand that. So we try to make it as easy as possible to set you up with the game plan, the talking points. You already have the story and then be able to go up to Capitol Hill. We set up meetings with staff and with members of Congress from your state, go up with folks from your state to be able to talk kind of on a localized level. And I always tell people, biggest thing, the most important thing, if you don't say anything in that meeting about the talking points that we gave you or the issues we talk about, if you just go in that office and talk about what you do every day and how you help people in their community, that's a win. That is exactly what we want you to do. I think it is advocacy, and being an advocate does not have to necessarily be stiff talking points and data and numbers and legislative wonky talk. There's a place for that elsewhere. But I think that exactly that's what they pay me for. But the most important thing is being able to come to DC, talk to legislators, and tell your story. Talk about the work you do. Because it is, you can talk about any industry from a business perspective in the abstract. Claims rates and margins and all these things and policies and rates. What they want to really hear, and the best way to simplify the message, is talk about, I live in your community. I work every day to make sure that people, our neighbors, people in our community, one, can buy a home, and two, that when they do buy that home, that the home is protected against issues we couldn't find before, so no one can come and claim ownership of their home. And then against fraud or other things happening down the road, or a new neighbor moving in and saying, I own half your land. We make sure I'll say it again, but it sounds cheesy, but it's real and it works. Protecting the American dream. So we talked about last week, housing policy and housing affordability and supply is so much in the minds of policymakers, and they look at it from the supply side, from building more, from tearing down regulatory burdens to building, to incentives and tax structure and what have you. But what we can't let them forget is that all that is important, but if you can't protect that asset and protect that investment in that home, what's it all for?
Yeah. Then what are we doing? No, I agree. And that's why it's such a great time for people that have not been active before or people that have kind of drawn back from it, because housing is so predominant in anybody who's running for office in the next at least 4 years.
Absolutely.
Probably more like 6 or 8, to your point last week about how long it's going to take to get out of this, and like all of the tools we have to bring to bear to create one equation that gets the job done that we need to get done. It's such a great time to be involved federally, state, locally. Again, I know you're in the advocacy and information business. We're in the news and information business. And it's just such an important time to stay up with everything that's moving, because it is being shaped right now. And in title and settlement, especially, we are so used to being at the bottom of the food chain, and we're not used to being consulted, and we just have to deal with whatever comes along, see FinCEN or see whatever the latest addition to the closing package is unnecessarily or whatever. Like we're really good about lamenting about all that not being influential, that it is really incumbent upon us to be a part of solution crafting when it is on the top of people's minds, and that is right now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the old adage that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we've seen that there. We're not old enough where a couple years ago, all of a sudden we were mentioned in the State of the Union. I
Yeah.
think it was not a great day in my
No,
job, and I
no.
don't think for anyone. But I think it is incumbent upon us. As you said, housing policy is so big right now and such on top of policymakers' mind. And to your point, it's not going to go away anytime soon. But I also think it's incumbent on us. While some may say we're a smaller part of the real estate ecosystem, I would argue differently, and we can talk about that another time. But it's incumbent on us to be able to tell that story to lawmakers. I think especially when you're looking at members of Congress or a presidential administration, whatever administration it may be, or state legislatures, there are a lot of competing issues out there. There are only 24 hours in the day, and they're working on a lot. Even the biggest advocate for housing policy has other things they have to think about throughout the day and focus on. So if any industry, but especially, the title industry, if we are not pushing our narrative and talking about the importance of the work that we are doing, anyone's going to get pushed aside. There's a bright new shiny thing all the time. And I think it's very easy for anyone, especially policymakers, to see a bright new shiny policy object off in the distance and want to focus on that and forget about what's happening over here. And it's incumbent on those professionals to be able to refocus the attention and find new ways to tell their story. And I think that's why advocacy is so important and so evergreen, that there's always something to tell. And I think it's why ALTA's put so much emphasis on being able to gather new data and figure out different stories that our members and different ways that our members are working on things, or what is the newest technology. We talked last week about how the president put out an executive order on digital closings, but the industry's been doing that for years. So finding those angles and those new ways to present the industry and be able to talk about the important core work that we do, and then how we connect to all of those other bright and shiny objects that legislators may be looking at on any given day or in any given election cycle.
Agree. And I think Ace, we've always had up our sleeve with regard to this is the hyper local nature of what we do. Real estate's obviously hyper local. We're in all the counties. Physically, we're in all the counties, and every one of those counties has an elected representative that is dying for information about what's going on back home so that they can remain relevant and adaptive. And I think, so many times we're so used to apologizing for what we do because nobody understands us and it's not fun at a cocktail party, that we forget to flip that script and talk about, and lead with what we do have as benefits. And man, being on that courthouse square on Main Street is worth a ton.
Absolutely. And I think working on the federal side of things, we always have this conversation with real estate and with housing. It is so locally driven. There are so many things that are decided at the state, local level that impact the industry. A lot of folks will look at something like ALTA Advocacy Summit, which is federal facing, talking to members of Congress about the industry. Why bother? It's all the decisions are being made at the state and local level, but we need to have an all of the above strategy. Just because
Sure.
that Congress can't set your rates in your state or approve your rates doesn't mean they don't have the ability to impact business down the line. I think, and I think even within various branches of the federal government, we talked about last week how Congress was moving a little slow on this housing bill and figuring out how it's going to move. So the president put out those two executive orders. I think there's always possibilities in any level of government that has the possibility of impacting our business, that it needs to be an all the above strategy, which is why I love when many ALTA Advocacy Summits that state LTA presidents and executive directors come to town and talk to federal legislatures as well. And it's just great to have that kind of crossover between folks that work every day at the state level as we're working at the federal level, be able to kind of cross paths and work on both sides of that spectrum, because it needs to be an all of the above strategy, not one or the other.
I completely agree. And, as a person who has fussed from time to time about how much my opinions are solicited or ignored, and I think anybody that's been in this industry for more than 5 minutes probably has some of those same memories, that we haven't always been asked. We haven't always felt like we've had great opportunity, or even if we talked, they weren't listening. And again, I just want to reassert the urgency of now, because we finally have people. It took a crisis, but we finally have elected people focused on housing policy once again. And I think that's really important. And I know you do, because it's your job. Let's recap. What are the policy initiatives folks are going to be talking about during the Advocacy Summit when they go talk to their electeds?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a couple of things top of mind as we discussed last week. I think talking about the FinCEN real estate rule. It's a very fluid situation right now. So by the time we get to May 11th, 12th, and 13th, things could have changed. But being able to, again, tell that story to lawmakers that here is this rule that was put upon us. We had all this engagement over the last couple of years as FinCEN put this together. And here's our experience on the ground as it happened and how it's impacting our ability to do our jobs. And I think a piece we don't talk about enough is how it's impacting home buyers. You and I talked about how the confusion out there of how this rule is impacting the home buyer and the process itself, and being able to tell that story to lawmakers and push for some changes. I think there's some common sense ways to narrow this rule should it go back into place, and lessen that burden and make it more streamlined and kind of get to the real meat of what they're trying to do, rather than burden this entire industry with reporting all this information. So telling that story and then talking about fraud, I think, as we talked about, fraud is such a big conversation right now, but it kind of, the grandioseness of it gets lost in the conversation of being able to talk about, here's all this big conversation about fraud, about scams, about all these things happening. Here's what's happening in the real estate industry. It's not just with banks, it's not just with wire fraud, although that plays a huge part in real estate related fraud, but being like, here's what's happening in the real estate industry, here's what we're facing, here's the work we do to prevent fraud, and here's how we're there to protect consumers ongoing from fraud and protect that biggest investment. And then I think always coming back to the unregulated alternatives to title insurance and promoting the Protecting America's Property Rights Act to make sure that these products that are being sold out in the marketplace are properly regulated, that they should be playing by the same rules that title insurers have to play by, and making sure that consumers understand what they're buying, how much they're paying for it, and what kind of protections they're getting. It shouldn't be left up to chance. So we're going to cover, it sounds like a lot, we're going to cover a lot of ground, but as we talked about, we try to make it as easy as possible. And again, my biggest advice, and I'll say this to folks when they come to Washington, D.C., if you don't talk about anything I just said, I don't care, as long as you've told a story about what you do in your community, and that lawmaker or that staff member leaves that meeting understanding our industry a little bit more and the impact that we have in the community. It's a win for me.
That's terrific. Well, again, as a many-time attendee, I highly recommend it. And to kind of help people think about how to put some of these puzzle pieces together, go do the fly-in in D.C., go around the Hill, talk to your electeds and their staff that are shaping tomorrow's policies. Then hop over or send another staff member over to Kansas City, come to NS3, where we talk about operationalizing and making it all work across all elements of the transaction, the big ecosystem. Between those two, you can, I think, start to feel like less of a victim to whatever winds blow along, and start to shape your future a little bit to a little bit better degree in a time when there's a lot of stuff changing very fast. I like a little feeling of control.
Yeah, absolutely. It's adapting to the business realities and understanding how to maximize the work of your business, and then going to talk to policymakers, whether it be in DC or in your state capital or in your town council, and telling them how your business is operating and how it could be better and how you can better serve their community. I think is such a great full circle conversation to have.
I for sure do too. Well, thank you all at ALTA for all the punches you're swinging on behalf of industry. I hope it's a wonderful Fed conference, and I'll meet you back a little while later to hear how it all went.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thank you so much for having me over 2 weeks to be able to talk about all this. There's a lot going on, so we appreciate you taking the time to let us join you. It's been fun.
Well, thanks again, Kevin, and really everyone at ALTA for all the work you do on behalf of industry and consumers. Now, everyone, at ALTA's Advocacy Summit, you're in the room where policy is still being formed, where your experience, your stories, your reality can actually influence the direction things take. And then just days later at NS3, you're surrounded by the full ecosystem, the people, the technology, the partners who help you translate all of that into how your business actually runs right now, today. It's an important time to be out and mixing with the ideas and with the people who make our industry happen. It's a time to influence and execute. Learn what's coming and then put it to work. And if you're looking for other ways to stay grounded in all of this as it evolves, a reminder, we've launched our Housing Inventory and Attainability Watch, something we'll keep building to help you keep track of what's actually happening beneath the headlines. So you can find links to the Advocacy Summit, NS3, and that new library in today's show notes. Thanks for spending this time with us today. If you found this information helpful, please like, subscribe, or comment. That just tells the machines you want more information like this. And we'll see you next time on Keys to Real Estate from October Research, where knowledge is the competitive advantage.